Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, builders. My name is Jay, and I'm the DevRel specialist at Lilypad Network. For anyone who's not familiar with Lilypad Network, we are a network that you can take AI models, deploy them, run them, and monetize them. So anything you see on Hugging Face, Llama, you can bring it onto our network, make it available for other developers, and they can deploy them in their dApps or websites. And every time someone makes an inference call, you can get paid for producing that module. So I want to thank you all for joining today, and I'll be going through a live demo of a RAG agent. So I put together a presentation, a demo with about like 3 different examples. So we'll go through the presentation, the demo, and then we'll wrap it up at the end with some business cases and going over some questions if you have any. So with that said, I'm going to start sharing my screen and the presentation, and we can get started. So what are RAG agents? If you're not familiar with RAG agents, this is a great intro to your projects. So a RAG agent is a retrieval augmented generation agent, and it's an AI system that enhances a chatbot's responses by first retrieving information from a specified data set. So you provided a data set, it looks at that data set, and then it returns a response. So to go into a bit more details, let's see how this step-by-step works. So a user enters a prompt. The agent searches through that database. It can be PDF files, text files. It can be a actual database. The point is you kind of take your data down, download it, or make it available to this AI agent. So when you enter your prompt, it searches through that knowledge base. Then it retrieves the data that's specific to your request, and then it generates a response. So it's kind of like our digital librarian, right? It's kind of searching through the information it has available and then retrieving something valuable to you. So why use a RAG agent? I think it's important to highlight these 3 features, and we've seen this go wrong when people use a general LLM versus a RAG agent. So a few examples that have been in the news over the past couple of years. There was one case where Air Canada, their chatbot gave a response to a potential customer. They were checking like, hey, if I make this decision, can I get a refund if it doesn't go well? The chatbot said, yeah, but then the actual organization didn't honor the refund. So it went to a court case, and it was resolved, and the customer got their money back. But the key thing to highlight here is that in a general LLM, it's not too good at having accurate data. So if you're using a RAG agent and it's referencing a file or your policies, then it's less likely to mess up and diverge from that. So that's one case. Another case is reducing hallucinations. So we've seen cases where chatbots are completely making up information that doesn't exist at all. And there was a famous case of a lawyer that went to court. He had some arguments, and he had some cases cited in his arguments, and the cases weren't entirely fabricated. They didn't exist at all. So we want to use RAG agents to reduce hallucinations and these bots completely making things up. And lastly, securely using LLMs with your own private data. This has been a big thing in the news as well. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you can use these LLMs without you having to give up your data to these large organizations. And we've seen this with Samsung, and they banned all their employees from using it because they were passing along private information to ChatGPT, and it was coming up in other messages. So for these three reasons, this is why you would want to use a RAG agent. Improving your factual accuracy, making sure that you're only relying on facts, data, truthful information. Reducing hallucinations, reducing the probability that it's going to make something up completely. And then, of course, securely using LLMs with your private data. You can give it access to your private data, but not necessarily give that data to other people in the public. So let's talk about some use cases. When do you really want to use this? One good use case is summarizing content. You have a huge piece of text. You want to just copy and paste it into there, summarize the context, and get those points. Extracting key pieces of information if you're looking for citations, that kind of thing. Let's say you have news publications. You have a bunch of different news reporting, and you want to cross-reference those reports. You can develop all those reportings in one file and have it cross-reference those checks. Making sense of open source data. There's a ton of different open source databases out there that you can make use of. Of course, analyzing on-chain data, retrieving personalized data, and generating personalized content. So once you know more about your user and you feed that as context to your LLM, then you can create more custom experiences and responses tailored to your users. So those are the use case, and let's get into the demos. Before I go into the demo, let me just quickly share my entire screen instead of just focusing here. So in this demo, we have a repo our team actually put together going through how to deploy your RAG agent. So the first thing it's going to do is we're going to go to the docs, review what's currently there, walk through it. It's super simple. Phil did an amazing job putting this together. And then we'll go through those 3 examples. So let me share my screen now. My entire screen here. And we're back at them. So if you click on this, you'll go to our docs. Our docs are docs.lilypad.tech/lilypad. And you can find everything you need to know here. But if you scroll down to these use cases, we have the section here called agents and this RAG support agent. So this is where you can find all the documentation on how to deploy your own RAG agent, how to find the repo, and other things that you can do with this agent. So this first section just covers kind of what we've discussed. What are the use cases? How does this work? Just for reference, we're using Llama 3, which is a 8 billion parameter model. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that when it generates its responses, it's relying heavily on our knowledge base versus all the other information it has. So when we choose smaller models, it's more likely to give us exact information. And then, of course, here on how to tweak the actual repo to fit your own needs. It's straightforward. All you have to do is basically update this issues.md file with the different content that you want the bot to retrieve or to read through. And then you just run the actual script. So it's super easy. And we can do that right now. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have your Neuro API key. So we can generate it here. Let's get started. I have one here, but we can create a brand new key. Let's say RAG agents. Of course, if this is your first time, you're going to have to sign up for an account before you can create your key. But we have our private key here. Now, let's go back to the actual docs. Okay, and let's go down to here. So if you navigate to here, you can see that we have a repo, and we want to clone that repo and then go into that project to actually work with it. So let's grab this, open up a terminal. That was actually a terrible idea to paste it in there, but let me actually go to documents. I like to keep all of my content just in one place. So I'm going to make sure I just clone it here. All right. And then let's CD into that repo. And let's open this up with our code editor. I personally like to use Cursor, but feel free to use whatever code editor you like. So one thing in the docs it notes here is to export your private key. What I've done is gone and updated the actual repo about 2 days ago so that you can just enter an environment variable and put your private key in there, because I like to kind of teach people in a way that makes it easy for them to deploy once they're actually ready. So what I would want to do in this .env file is take my Lilypad token, my Lilypad API token here. I just want to make sure it's exact, so just copied and pasted it, even though it's fairly straightforward. And then I want to enter my key in here. So I'm grabbing my key, pasting that in. And now my Anura key is in my repo. All right, next thing you want to do is install your requirements. So in this requirements.txt file, it'll have all the different packages that need to be downloaded in order for this to work. So let's open up a terminal. We have our terminal here. Install requirements. Cool. And that would take a couple seconds to download. I think last time it took maybe a minute, but this today it seems like it's working a lot quicker. All right, so we installed it, and now depending on which Python you have installed, you basically run Python CLI.py, and it'll actually start running the agents. So let me clear this out just so it's easily visible. Py. Oh. And it'll kick off your agent. So what this is doing is basically you're running this CLI.py file. If we look at this file, you can see kind of all the content that's being sent to us right now. So this is handling all of the data, the paths and the tokens, things like that. But then once you actually run it, what it's doing is printing this Lilypad RAG support agent. So if you customize this agent on your own, you can modify this so that like your intro is slightly different. The things that you're sending to the user are slightly different, and maybe your error messages are slightly different. So here we have some error messages if you are not connected to the API or you fail to initialize the agent. Fairly straightforward issues that you may come into contact with, and then you will need to, of course, update your API key or whatever the issue may be. And then, of course, while the program is running, it'll basically just continue to take in questions. And you see here we have like the Lilypad frog question, and that's what it's printing. And then it's taking in your inputs and then generating a response and returning that to the screen. So let's test this out. Once we start running this, you can see on our terminal, you see like the question, the answer thing come up, and we can ask it a question about Lilypad. Now, to understand what context it has and what its knowledge base is, we can click on this docs drop down and then this issues.md. And we basically just copied and pasted a bunch of information from Lilypad over into here. So if anyone wants to learn about Lilypad and let's say they were approaching the website, they could talk to a chatbot and say, hey, I want to learn more about Lilypad, have these questions or whatever it is. So we can do something here, like say, what is Lilypad? So it's thinking, it's taking your prompt, looking at this issues.md folder, crawling through all the content, finding relevant information, and then generating its response. So we have here, Lilypad is a decentralized compute network that enables Web3 applications to use its compute power with the Lilypad CLI and smart contracts. We've kind of updated our content a bit there, so we need to update this as well. But it's pretty straightforward. Like, let me see, how to use the CLI. So here you can see it's just referencing the info that we put, and we can ask it as many questions as we want. But one thing I want to highlight here is that it's looking exactly at the context, and it's not really making up additional information like the way ChatGPT tends to do or Claude because of this approach with RAG agents. So you see I wrote how to use a CLI, and it gave me this information here. But let me see, what are some dApps on Lilypad network? Now, if you look through our docs, you can notice a bunch of use cases, and you can kind of infer that like these are dApps without us explicitly having to state that these are dApps. Now, with these models, since it's a much smaller model and it's only looking through the context you provided it, if you ask it for things like that where it's not explicitly stated in your docs, then it's going to return no match found. So this kind of proves that it's only relying on factual information. If it finds it in the text, it will return it to you. If that isn't explicitly stated in the text, then it's going to tell you there's no match found. But in this case, it provides additional context on the dApps running on the network, stuff like that. So it only mentions that Lilypad is designed to enable mainstream Web3 applications to use its compute network, but it does provide a list of specific dApps. So it's actually doing a little bit better than last time when I tested it, because before it was like there's no dApps, but in this case, it kind of has a little bit more context here. But this is a basic example of how you can spring up your own RAG agent. You basically change the content in the issues. You change the commands that it's printing to your terminal. And then you can build something like a wrapper on top of it to serve this to a website or something like that. So we've seen it kind of preset already with Lilypad. But let's test out some other cases. So give me 1 second to open these links up. I have like a link of the Constitution, and I figured like this is one of the cases where there may be students who come into here, maybe they're really young, they don't really know what this context is about, but they have to learn about it for school. So we could have just deployed a RAG agent that references all the content on this page and then allow students to speak to the text essentially through the chatbot, right? So let's take all that content, let's copy that. Let's replace this issues. And let's rerun this. So let's clean this. Oh, that's odd. That should clean my terminal, but that's fine. All right, so I cleared my terminal. All we have to do is basically rerun this because we switched our content. Oh, something's a bit weird with my terminal, so let me just type this in. But what we've done is provided a new context, right? So it has a different file to reference, and it says, all right, this is about the Constitution. So what is the point of this doc? All right, so you can imagine maybe like a second grader or a third grader visiting the website, seeing a chat bot that's only trained on the content that's on the page and saying something like this, like, what's the point of this doc? They have no context. They don't really know much. So let's see what this returns. And in these cases, we kind of framed it as a support agent, but as long as it's retrieving data from a large file database, making sense of that data, and then providing responses based on that context, you could essentially deploy this for anything. It could be for support agents, for additional context on a page, for making sense of the data itself. And after this, I'll go through a few different business cases because I love to give people ideas that they can run off with. So I'll do that once this stops running. But this is taking a bit longer than it usually does. There may be an issue with the request. Usually it'll say like no response or something like that. If there's an issue, all you have to do is rerun it and it'll come back. So let's see if this works. I almost sometimes think that it's easier to kind of like stop it and then restart it in these cases because it usually takes no more than like 5 to 6 seconds. But let's see what happens here. And I'm going to briefly check to see if there's any comments or anything. So I'll briefly stop sharing my screen. And if you have any questions, send them in. If you have ideas you want to discuss and brainstorm while I'm doing this, feel free to add it into the chat and I'll take a look at it. So give me 1 sec. All right, cool. Looking through comments. All right, I don't see any comments on here, but if you have any questions, anything you want to discuss, feel free to post it in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or X. I see this on kind of the right-hand side of my screen, so I can easily address any questions you have. All right, so it kind of timed out as expected. Let me start sharing my screen. As I mentioned, it's usually pretty quick, so if it's not quick, there's some sort of issue here. But let's clear this again. Okay. Stop that from running, and let's try this again. Yeah, I have no idea why my content is ending at the bottom of the page, but I don't know. Looks like a slight odd issue with my terminal. So what is this doc about? And you saw the responses I did with the first doc, so it generally retrieves the information quickly. But let's see. Hopefully someone's not overloading the network or something. But we have a response. So this document appears to be a transcription of the United States Constitution, specifically Article 3, Section 1, and other sections that follow, and outlines various U.S. powers granted to the government, including establishing post offices, promoting science and arts, and constituting tribunals. I actually didn't know there was content about promoting science and arts. So what does it say about promoting science and arts? So little things like this, if people have additional questions, they can always kind of keep asking about the text that we're reviewing and kind of find out more. So you see here, what does it say? All right, so it says that Congress shall promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries. So it sounds like they're talking about copywriting, and I'm assuming that at the time this was written, copywriting wasn't kind of respected for individual writers, artists, creators. So it's interesting to see that they've considered that. So here's an example of a chatbot that could potentially exist on top of something like a government website and tell you information about the content instead of you reading through like hundreds of pages or something like that. So that was one example, and let me give you one more. So the other example I have is kind of a more friendly one, more kind of casual, and you can use this for like a, let's say, trivia game or something like that. So what this is basically a list of common misconceptions that people have. So yeah, of course, you can use this for like a trivia or something like that. It's just kind of fun, a little DAP you can put together. All right, let me grab all this. I don't really care about the end, but let's grab this. So same thing, let's paste in this text to our issues. My terminal is so high that I didn't even realize I was covering my file. Okay, so I just copy and pasted all the text there. My agent is not running right now, but let's clear the terminal. I don't know where it's even at, so let's just reopen this. Okay, cool. And then we want to run Python CLI.py. And then, of course, it's going to spring up our bot again and then reference all these things. And then we can have a kind of quick, fun little thing to find out weird misconceptions. So are there any misconceptions about fruit? I don't know, just something random that came up. I'm sure there's plenty of people who have misconceptions about everything around them. So it's interesting to see if maybe there's something about fruit. So it says, yes, there are several misconceptions about fruit mentioned in the context. The forbidden fruit in the book of Genesis is often depicted as an apple, but this is not supported by the original Hebrew text, which only mentions fruit. Okay, that's random. Bananas contain naturally occurring radioactive isotopes, but the levels of radiation from eating bananas are far too low to cause radiation poisoning. I can easily see some sort of conspiracy theorist running away with this and saying, like, we are getting radiation poisoning or something. So that is good to know. That is a common misconception and interesting that's on there. And there's a misconception that artificial turf is maintenance free, when in fact it requires regular raking and patching to keep it functional and safe. So this is kind of a little bit more fun one, like a fact finding, like your Snapple facts or something like that. But you can search through that context. So we've shown 3 different cases, looking through like Lilypad docs, looking through the US Constitution, and looking through a list of random misconceptions. So there's a ton of different applications here, but let's go on to how you can turn these into actual businesses. Because we frequently talk about builders and teach you how to use our modules and our tools, but ultimately it's going to be great for you to take your idea and make it into a real life business that you can start generating revenue on our network with. So some business ideas, something like an AI-powered study buddy. You can provide all of your context that you have on your notes, your school notes, and you can use it as a study guide. Ask it different questions, maybe have it come up with different questions for you to answer and see if it's right according to your text. You would need a slightly bigger AI model to do that, but it's definitely possible. A crypto market intelligence platform. So you can analyze different reports on, like, let's say, how a token is performing, download that data set, make it accessible to your RAG agent, and have it perform some sort of analysis on it. AI financial analyst, it could also, let's say, take your budget and analyze it, see where you're repeatedly doing wrong. Let's say if you have a large data set over maybe 10 years of like you budgeting personally, you can feed this over to your RAG agent and have it provide some insight on your financial performance or your individual budgeting, something like that. Fitness and diet coach. So you can provide it information on how you're doing. What is your weight, your height, all this additional context so that it creates diets specifically for you, stuff like that. And there's tons of other ideas that we're seeing spring up, from fun to mental health applications, medicine, AI oncologists we have that sprung up. So there's a ton of different ideas. If you have something you want to test out, you're not sure how to get started, feel free to join our community, hop in, and we will guide you. And next steps. So start building. If you haven't taken a look at this, we have a list of bounties, and there's a ton here that are available for you to cross off, all the way from like bringing modules online to deploying particular agents. If you noticed earlier in my presentation, I had a video of a frog that went to a library. That is a text to video model, and we don't currently have one available. So if you bring one of those onto the network, then you could potentially win Lilybits. So that's one thing that you can do to get started. You can deploy your own RAG agent following the same exact steps I went over here today. You can connect the RAG agent to another module. I think this is kind of interesting because a lot of people have access to the base models. You can kind of all do the same thing, but if you connect it to another module, you give your bot a competitive advantage that others don't have access to. So brainstorm with us. I highlighted this module because one of our community members actually made this earlier in the week, and it's a text-to-speech model. So it would be awesome if someone could like take this module, connect it to maybe a RAG agent, and make something up with that. I could imagine like something for people with disabilities, reading documentation, stuff like that. And then, of course, we have a ongoing hackathon with Encode, so you can join the hackathon. And lastly, join our community, join our Discord if you're interested in building. I am constantly in there. We have a great team that's there to support you, brainstorm, talk about use cases, help you set up your GPU node, whatever it needs to be done. We're always available. And of course, follow us on Twitter. Navigate to our Twitter account. It's at lilypad_tech. Let us know what you think about the demo. I want to thank you all for joining me today. My name is Jay, and it's been great talking to you all. I'll see you guys online, and I hope everyone has a great day. See you later.